So welcome friends to this paper, which is Research Methods in Business. Course code of the paper is BX521 and we are into the Executive MBA program, and now we are entering into the unit number 2 of that paper, Business Methods in Research, and we are today going to study about secondary data. Let me introduce myself, as this is my first class. I am Professor Dipujyoti Bhattacharjee, initially currently affiliated with Assam University Department of Statistics, and it is an opportunity for me to get a chance of interacting with you through this paper, BX521 Research Methods in Business. So right away, let us start with this particular part of the uh, course content, which is there in unit number 2, as I have already mentioned, and we will be discussing about secondary data. In this presentation, we will be learning about what is secondary data, what are the advantages of using secondary data, what are the different sources of secondary data that we have in our country, and why we shall use secondary data, and why we shall not use secondary data in some cases. Uh, I mean to say that will be a discussion on relative merits and demerits, and when you speak about the uh, relative merits and demerits of secondary data, obviously primary data also comes into discussion, but we'll have a detailed discussion about primary data during our live classes at the end of this week. Now, particularly, let us start with secondary data. So at the very outset, let me introduce the secondary data with an example, or with a definition of a formal definition of secondary data. Uh, the data that is collected by someone else and is also processed by someone else. And when we consider such a data in our study, then we are actually using secondary data. Here, two things are very pertinent. One is that it is collected by someone else, and the second thing is that this is processed also by someone else. Maybe those two groups are same, or they may be different. It may be in terms of individual or an organization doing the collection and interpretation or analysis done by some other group, uh, or they may be the same group, maybe two different divisions under the same group doing this work. But anyway, this is the data that is reaching us is in the form of processed data. That means data is already been collected and compiled, and that is the way in which it comes to us. It is a different investigating body, and not you yourself or your organization has not done this work. It is interesting to note that the data which is primary in the hands of one becomes secondary in the hands of other. This is a very interesting statement. You see, the same data, it's maybe primary or secondary. That means if I speak about a data and ask you that whether this is a primary data or secondary data, my question itself may not be correct, because I should also tell along with that who is the user of that data. Let us make it very simplified way. Let us speak about the census survey. You know that the census in our country is conducted after every 10 years. So we had census in 2001, we had census in 2011. Unfortunately, census in 2021 could not be conducted because of the pandemic situation, and but the work is going on, and probably with a delay of 2 years, by 2023 2023 will be having the data of this particular census, which has been held up because of the pandemic. But it does not mean that no work is going on. It's going on in war footing. And history has seen that Indian census have never stopped. They even worked, people results were declared even when the Second World War was going on, or any other war, any emergency, famine, everything, plague, whatever was there. But census always kept on working and was delivering. But this year also they will be delivering, but with a delay. Anyway, coming back to the study. So census in our country is performed through the Directorate of the Census Commissioner, who is responsible for collecting the census data and going for the publication of the census data. Entire job related to census is looked after by the Census Commissioner of India. But the funding agency is definitely the Government of India. So who is funding the census? Government of India is funding the census. So for Government of India, this is a primary data, is a primary source of data, census. However, when we use our data, when we use that data in our research, that is census data in our research, then that data becomes secondary data for us because it is collected by someone else, compiled by someone else. We are just recording it, we are just stating it for our own purpose. So accordingly, that particular data set or that particular values which we are quoting is secondary information and not primary information. However, it is primary for the Government of India. When a Government of India uses such data for their own statements, that becomes a primary statement from their side because they are the funding agencies. So this way, what I told earlier, that if I ask you that whether census data is primary or secondary, that is a wrong question. Census data used by Government of India, whether that is primary or secondary, that might be a correct question. But so when we speak about the data, we must also tell who is the user of the data, and then the question of primary or secondary comes to us. Okay, now another simple example may be that often you find that research is going on in the universities, and the university researcher might have collected some information, working hours in the laboratory, and then recording it. Now, when someone else comes and take the data and refer to that particular data. Now, for the initial researcher who has spent hours in the lab and got the data, for him, these records are primary records. These data are primary data. But for the person who is just quoting that data for his own research, not doing the work in the lab, for him or her, that is a secondary data. So the user changes, the data may also become from primary to secondary and vice versa. Now we have more about secondary data. The information is recorded and published in a structured format. All information that are published are in structured format. Structured format means in the form of tables. There are two ways of representing data. One is through tables, one is through graphs. So these are all structured format of representing data. Data when collected, they are in the form of raw data. This needs processing. Some words you must have heard like data cleaning. So data processing, data coding, all these things are part of preparing a structured format from the raw format of data. When data is collected, that is in raw form. Now, obviously, as I have said earlier, that data collection and compilation is done by someone else, and we are using that compiled data. So obviously, secondary data will appear before us in a structured format. Unless it is a data product, such type of data are easier to collect and manage. Secondary data are generally easily available. It might be recorded in books, journals. We'll see about the different sources of secondary data. We find some data in the website also. And some things are like data products. Data products means some data collected by some people and later on they are sold, priced, maybe in the form of CDs, maybe in the form of website materials where you require some to make some payment to get access, or maybe in the form of books or journals, and those are to be purchased. So this may sometimes become difficult to attain, but uh, because some of these data sets are really very highly priced. For example, sample registration system data collected by Government of India is quite highly priced data. It is not very nominally available. So these other than that, most of the secondary data are easier to attain and to collect. And since they are in compiled form, so you just don't require to put much effort or don't generally require to hire a database administrator to manage such data sets. Secondary data is generally less expensive. Less expensive in two sense. First thing is that secondary data, as I told, that yeah, it can be purchased and some of the agencies are really selling data at a high price. But if you consider the collection of the same data, for example, suppose you forget about the entire country, think of your very small locality, which might have been, some of you might be staying in some societies. I mean, hired in an apartment which belongs to a particular society, several other apartments are there. Now, if you want to conduct a socio-economic survey on the people of your society, maybe there are about 60, 70 flats in your apartments in your society. So if you want to, or if you think of collecting information from all these households about some socio-economic survey, and then you think about the amount of time and effort and obviously money that will be required to collect this information. However, if we get a secondary source, someone who has done the study and have set up a compiled the data and presented it through graphs and tables, so that is easier to access. Even if he charge some amount of money for that, that amount he will charge will be much less than the amount required to conduct the survey. So even if secondary data is priced publication, if it is money is to be paid to attain that or get that secondary data, that particular secondary data still remains less expensive compared to the primary data. Okay. Now let us look at the sources of secondary data. There are different sources of secondary data, but they can be classified into two broad groups. One is documentary source of data and one is electronic sources of data. Electronic sources of data, mainly website. Earlier, some data were available in the CD form, which could be hired or purchased. But these days, use of CD has become restricted, especially because data can be very quickly transferred through websites. And also, if you not necessarily that it is in a website, so it should be given free. The owner of the data can put some restrictions from where he can earn some money also. So electronic source of data nowadays have got more or less converged to website data only, data available in website to a great extent. And there are obviously documentary sources of data. So let us look into the documentary sources of data first and then go to the electronic sources. Documentary sources of data, these are some published sources. Among the published sources, we are quite acquainted with different types of government publications. So the central government and state government in our country, they actually, in the form of information, they provide different types of data which are either published monthly or quarterly or annually on different subjects. Some examples for such data can be the monthly statistical abstract, national income statistics, economic survey reports, report of the National Council of Applied Economic Research, FICI data, that is Federation of Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Indian Council of Agricultural Research, Central Statistical Organization, this is called as Central Statistical Office, National Family Health Service, NFHS, which is conducted after a gap of almost 5 years. So it started in 1992-93, and now till now we have the 5 rounds of National Family Health Survey already conducted, which is actually a survey uh, going under the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. Different surveys conducted by National Sample Survey Office or National Sample Survey Organization, earlier it was called organization. So these are some Indian government sources of data that is available in published form. Some other published sources of data at the international level consists of data which are in World Health Organization, the United Nations Organization, International Labour Organization, International Monetary Fund, World Bank, Asian Development Bank, uh, and such data are generally published both monthly and quarterly, and they are almost all of them have their own annual report where you can look into the annual data, generally classified by nations. Some semi-official publications are also there which actually publish their data. These are like mostly local self-governments doing this type of published data. Corporation, district boards, panchayat, municipalities, they publish their annual report and some subsequent reports depending on the purpose. Committees and commissions are sometimes established by the government for a specific purpose. These committees and commission do perform their survey, and the report is actually recorded. For example, the 10th Financial Commission or 6th Pay Commission, they will come up with their report where they give detailed information about several aspects which are related to that particular report of the commission. So this is also a source of published data that we have, though these committees and commissions data are not time bound or not in a regular manner, but this is only for specific purpose data. Now let us look at some published source, but these type of publications are private publications. A very important source of such publications and quite popular is newspapers. Every day we read the newspaper, and in the newspaper we see lot of things are recorded. They may not be in the form of numerical values, but several incidents description are there. These are also a source of data, which is a private source of data. Some journals are there which actually where different types of scientific outcomes and research of related to different fields of humanities, commerce, business are recorded, and they have lot of information including numerical values. Uh, some of such examples of such journals are like Economist, Economic and Political Weekly, Indian Journal of Commerce, Journal of Industry and Trade, Business Today, India Today, Outlook, etc. Some of the research and financial institutions, some of the research and financial institutions also publish their reports annually, like Indian Institute of Finance. All institutions, mostly in our country, most of the institutions, government-run institutions, come up with an annual report, at least if not with other type of publication, but at least they will come up with an annual report where the all the things are recorded, all important steps, decisions taken, strategies made, balance sheet, income expenditure statements, etc. will be there. So that is a strong source of data. In addition to these, reports prepared by research scholars in universities, etc., also provide some secondary source of information. Now, in the university or in a college, you will find that there is library. In a university library, along with regular books and journals which are being kept, obviously these days lot of electronic things have come up, electronic books, electronic journals. But in addition to that, in a university library, you will also see that there are a section, or there is a section where research done by the scholars of that university is compiled or kept in the these are actually unpublished research work but are available for public. So this is somewhat when the research is being published in journals, then it becomes a published research, but otherwise it remains as an unpublished research which is actually a product of that particular university. So that way, or organized institution, and that way you can tell that that is a private type of data. Some unpublished sources are there which are actually not in published form and hence not available in the public domain. For example, certain research institutions, trade organizations, university, research scholars, private firms, sorry, sorry, business institutions, etc., do collect data, but they don't normally do not publish this data. So this is a type of private information that is available, but definitely a source of secondary data. Now you may visit in and get access to those particular information, even if it is private, that special permission is required to visit that data, but definitely that is a secondary sources of data, but they are not or cannot be brought to much use as things are not in the public domain. So obviously this authenticity of such data may be questioned. Now let us look at some of the electronic sources of data. Mostly these are about online journals. So Business Standard, Business World, Business Today, India Invest, Census India. This is about socio-economic data related to census. Then Indian Budget, then Government of India Directory, which gives you access to all different ministries and departments there and the contact persons therein. and indiastat.com is a private data service provider. Actually, they compile different type of government data, and might be they have some permission from the government of India, otherwise they could not run the organization. They actually collect different types of government data, just secondary data they collect, and they put it up in the website, but you require to pay them to get access to those data. So generally, if you want to get data about, say, a road, the district-wise data for the uh, road in terms of number of kilometers, Pakka road, Kacha road, etc. in the different districts of India. So there is, you might not find that particular data in websites together. Then you go to visit this website, that is indiastat.com, and then you will find this type of data. They actually collect the data from different state government and central government publications, and compile this data, type in the data once again, and give you some search options so that you can search out the things. But they are obviously not doing any primary study, but they are using other study, and put it in little bit professional manner, but all data sources are not very up to date. Means you enter and then you find the data is say 2015 data. So this type of things happen, but they are actually priced publication. This is a organization which is offering data, uh, which is you have to purchase the subscription for a year or month and then visit this data. Okay, so these are some of the government offices who actually have their website. These are the website address where you can go, enter, and find out the relevant data set which are available. There is a data set of districts, Indian districts. So there also district level data is available. Districts of India, districts of India. If you type in Google districts of India, you will end up in that particular website where district-wise different types of data, like what is the population density, what is the male-female composition, sex ratio, etc. What is the extent of urbanization? All these things are available. How many is the urban population, urban area, how much, rural area, how much, district-wise. The district directory of India. So there you find a lot of district level statistics. Okay, other than that, you can see the Indian Council of Agriculture and Research, Ministry of Commerce and Industry, uh, IIFT, Indian Institute of Foreign Trade, Department of Industrial Policy and Promotion, Ministry of Commerce and Industry, and Food and Public Distribution System, Khadi and Village Industries. So all these are their websites. So these websites can be accessed for data in this regard. We have some other like Board of Industrial and Financial Reconstruction, Building Material and Technology Promotion, Central Food Technological Research Institute, National Council of Traders Information, National Handloom Development Corporation Limited, the Associated Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and Federation of Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, FICCI. So this is their website. So accordingly, you can visit these websites and can go into the details of the data set and can see whatever data these institutes offer, for which might be a lot of importance to the public. So these are different source of primary and secondary data. Sorry, these are the different source of secondary data which are in published form or unpublished form, in documented form, or in electronic form. So now let us, before we end up, we have something we require to know about the precaution of using secondary data. We have found a big advantage of secondary data, that secondary data is relatively much less expensive. Sometimes it is even available for free. And in addition to that, we don't have to put much effort to collect secondary data. And so always you must be thinking that, okay, then why to collect the primary data if secondary data is offering us so much of benefit? The first reason why we should be very careful while using secondary data is that it may not be suitable for our study. For example, suppose someone has performed a study in an organization, say maybe Steel Authority of India Limited. So in Steel Authority of India Limited, uh, one steel plant in a part located in a particular place, a particular individual researcher has made a study about the income of the different means the salary that the different people are getting in this particular organization in this Steel Authority of India Limited. Different people, what job they are, what is the salary that they are getting across all designations, entire group. Okay, fine. So you have a very good source of data. Now, suppose the purpose of your study is the benefits that they are getting, benefits the employees getting. Little bit different. You are looking into the benefits. Obviously, salary is a benefit. Uh, and another person, previous researcher, has collected the salary statement of all the individuals. Now, your purpose is little bit different. You want to find out that, okay, what is their earning, or means what are the benefits that they have got. So that includes salary, but they, in addition to the salary, they might be getting other benefits, like they might be getting transportation free from their home to the industry. There are buses which are flying throughout the town, so that people staying any part in the town can take the bus service and come to the workplace. So for coming to the workplace, you don't have to spend any money. Also, he might be getting some educational allowances for his children. So in that case, what happens, that his child's this thing is getting compensated. Uh, Educational expenditure is getting compensated for this. So these parks are actually not coming in the study that has been made by the previous researcher who just looked into the salary of the employees. Now, if I quote that study, if I take the data from that study, many other aspects like medical reimbursement, children's education fee reimbursement, transportation fees, and then several other might be benefits might be there. So those things are deprived in my study. My data set is not actually very much specific for the purpose of my study. It is giving some information, but that is not good enough. I required more information. So the previous study on which I am basing is not providing full information. So that's why it is written that the parks are not available. Basic pay is known to me, and the take home salary is also known to me, but the additional parks is not available from the previous study. So the suitability of the data set in my study is suffering. And this is one example. Reliability of secondary data. You see, secondary data is collected by someone else. Even the compilation is done by someone else. So I am not sure about whether the collection process was correct, whether the collection process was unbiased, or the person did the survey was biased and wanted to show a particular type of result, and accordingly he expressed the study focusing on something. I don't know that. I don't know whether it was accurately corrected. I don't know whether when he tabulated the data, he committed some mistakes or not, because I don't have a chance of checking the data. That if I would have seen the raw data also, then I can check that, okay, let me make the table for myself and check it out with that person. No such option is there, because you don't have access to raw data. And also you don't know the method which was used by him for collecting the data. Now you see, there are different methods of collecting data. We'll see it in due course of time. But the method is not known, because he might tell about the method, but well, whether that method was suitable or not, I might not be sure. Unless and until I study, then only I can make it out that whether his method was erroneous or whether his method was correct. And then adequacy of secondary data, that actually sometimes there is timeliness. Suppose you perform a study 5 years earlier. I am using your study. Now in these 5 years, many things might have changed. You look at your e-commerce. 5 years earlier, e-commerce was not that popular as it is today. Initially, when e-commerce started, people were scared to make a deal on the web without seeing the product, without knowing whom you are paying, and also not sure whether you should go for it, because you have heard that, okay, some fraud may come, do some hacking and take you all the money. So whether it is good enough to disclose the um, ATM number, or say, sorry, ATM number or credit card number to the website. So there were a lot of doubts in the mind of the people. And so 5 years earlier, and players were also very less. Now so many players are there. doing e-commerce. So earlier, so it was due to different reasons, say 5 or 7 years earlier, e-commerce was not very popular, but nowadays it has become very popular even in small towns. You find that many people are ordering things online. So e-commerce is in the uh, rampage. It's doing havoc, e-commerce. But it was not the situation 5 years earlier. So a study made 5 years earlier related to some electronic transaction, etc., might not be uh, up to date today, because there are some concerns might have been raised by the respondents which do not exist any longer, or people have overcome those doubts, and it might be very popular. So secondary data actually lacks in timeliness. And for example, we can think that's like, suppose a particular study which is on some states, selected states of India. So we compile those results and make a conclusion on India. Or that person might have done the same thing, that he collected information from some states of India and making a generalized conclusion on India. And if we follow his statement, this might be a blunder, because what might he might have done might not be correct, and that error actually gets copied or carried in your study as well. So these are some of the precautions. Now when you looked at the advantage, it looked at, okay, secondary data is very good, but when you look at the disadvantage or say precautions, I don't tell it is a disadvantage. Some books you will find that they are telling these are disadvantages, but what I want to say is that these are some precautions which you have to take care of when you study about with, so when you want to perform some study with secondary data. And then when you look at the precautions, they look so nasty, they look so difficult to attain these precautions, that you are now thinking probably of going with primary data, because primary data is definitely better in number of ways, because you know what you are going collecting, you know that you were unbiased, you can be sure about the method that that should be used for collecting the data by taking information from or taking opinion of several experts. But what happens in reality? Last slide. Now the question arises, which one is better? Primary data is better, secondary data is better. Oh, you see that the primary data is better because you collect it. Maybe it is expensive, but even then, if you look in terms of its reliability, primary data seems to be better. But what we have seen, especially in research, in a number of cases, we have seen that when we speak about primary data, the researcher starts cooking the data, they start manipulating the data, they start generating their data. Now they come with some figures which is unreliable. They tell that I have primary data, this is my primary data. You challenge them, they will tell that I have gone to the field, I have collected. This is what we find. But if it is a secondary data, then I have a chance to cross check. I can ask him that, okay, show me what is your source. That's why this is an RBI publication. From there I have got the data. Okay, show me the source. Show me the source. If he is unable to show the source, then so he is gone. Means it is obvious that he has manipulated the data. But primary data you cannot challenge. You cannot tell that, okay, show me the data. You tell, you have to come to the field then, or you have to go to the lab, and maybe that for that particular experiment requires 2 or 3 days to complete this experiment. So I cannot go to the lab and wait for 2 3 days to get the result. So sometimes primary data is difficult to verify from a researcher's point of view. When someone is doing a research under your supervision, then this is what we encounter with primary data. So often we actually find that secondary data is easier to handle. Uh, it is less expensive, and also we can verification of the secondary data is much easier compared to verification of primary data. And that's why we tell that rob the data means you collect the secondary data and don't manufacture. Don't tell that primary data you have collected while you manufacture it. So rob the data. So with these few words, let me conclude the presentation of today. Thank you for listening to this. If you have any doubt about this presentation, any point, kindly note it down. And when we sit for the live sessions, we'll take a discussion on those points where which requires clarification. Thanks for listening. Thank you. Thank you once again.